After almost 3 years in the creation process, my book, The Spirit of Work, Timeless Wisdom, Current Realities, is making its publishing debut end of April 2022. By interweaving science, business, and sacred texts from the world's great spiritual traditions, The Spirit of Work offers a high-level but approachable way to view and structure work from individual, community, and institutional perspectives. I will be adding some solo podcasts to the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast to give you a taste of what the book is like and to whet your appetite for more. When the April countdown to publication starts, there will be weekly live sessions, book readings, and prize draws you will definitely not want to miss. To get in on the VIP launch and get your advanced reader copy of Chapter 6, Why You Need Your Heart to Work, go to shiftworkplace.co/bookvip. That's shiftworkplace.co/bookvip. Hello, Culture and Leadership Connections podcast listeners. Today, I'm really thrilled to present to you Dr. Laurika Booysen, who is a family doctor born and raised in South Africa. She comes from a military background. Her father, brother, and sister all served in the South African National Defence Force. And she served in the South African Military Health Services for 6 years before coming to Canada. She knew from a young age that she wanted to help people, and this led to a career in medicine. Currently, Dr. Booysen is experiencing firsthand the cultural and medical system contrasts between Canada and South Africa as she adjusts to working in Canada. Dr. Booysen attributes her passion to her faith and her multi-ethnic background. In South Africa, there is a saying, Ubuntu, I am because you are. We are defined by our compassion and kindness towards others. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Marie, so much for having me.
Yeah, it's really great to have you on the podcast, and I have been waiting for a long time to interview you because I'm all excited to hear about your story. A full disclosure to the podcast listeners, I actually found Dr. Booysen by going to a clinic where she was working, and at that point she was taking over for somebody else, and I saw her by accident, and I was so taken by her that we became friends, and we have discovered a lot of interesting things about each other. So it's been a very exciting journey, and I really wanted to find out more of the details by interviewing you on the podcast.
Fantastic. I'm very privileged and honored by you and your family for inviting me into your world and teaching me so much about Canadian culture. So thank you.
Let's tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and what you do outside of the formal bio.
So I came to Canada about 3 years ago. So I'm fairly new to Canada, but it feels like I've been here longer just because of acclimatizing and the things I get to see and deal with, which has been a real privilege for me to be part of a medical system that encompasses so much ethnic and cultural differences. And Canada is such a vast country. So I am a sponge when it comes to learning about people's cultures, and I absolutely love it. Currently, I'm working in a community health center with the Jasper Place Wellness Center. The center was started about 15 years ago by my CEO, and we have grown the clinic in the last year into serving not only the community around us, but the rest of Edmonton. As you know, many doctors are leaving the province, and there are a lack of doctors at the moment. So yeah, I'm very happy to be serving in that capacity. We deal with homelessness, we deal with drug addiction, mental health, and of course, an array of health problems, because health is not only physical, but health is mental, psychological, spiritual. There's so many aspects to health. And so we hope to do it more on a holistic level. And then, of course, I love the mountains. I even love the snow. It's beautiful just because we don't get to experience the snow in South Africa. So every moment, every time I meet a different person, I'm greeted with a lot of kindness. I'm greeted with a lot of mercy. So I really appreciate being here and just learning so much and being part of a community and even a work environment where I'm allowed to grow, where I'm allowed to be autonomous, and also teaching my patients and whoever I interact with, empowering them in their own health journey.
It's really the reason that I was most interested in getting to know you was because of this compassion that you have and this sincere interest that I see you use for all your patients, and also your ability to diagnose people from a holistic perspective I don't think there are too many medical doctors who use a variety of alternatives in addition to just prescribing drugs. So you might tell a patient to do something like to take a particular vitamin or to consult a nutritionalist or to go for a massage or something like that, which I have never experienced personally. Maybe other doctors do that, but I never heard of anyone doing that before, and it's really nice. The only equivalent would be, in my experience, was when I was in the Czech Republic a number of years ago, and I had to go to a pharmacy for something, and the pharmacist was able to both give drugs, nutritional supplements, Ayurvedic medicine, homeopathy, and naturopathic remedies. And she said, use 2 or 3 of these things from these different systems will help to clear up your infection. And I thought, wow, the whole world should be like this. And you're the second person I met like that in the health profession.
Wow, that is incredible, Marie. And I appreciate you so much saying that, especially coming, from a pharmacist, right? So I love the fact that I learn so much from my patients. And I must say, most of my advice is when I learn something from a patient, what has worked for them. And I've learned so much from you as well. So just learning from them, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And we are also different and unique. So what works for one patient might not work for another patient. So giving your patients the options and explaining to them, this might work for you at this stage, or this medication might work for you for this ailment, but try these others too, because we are dealing with a whole body. When somebody comes in with a symptom, it's actually just a symptom. We don't have a diagnosis yet. So we need to hopefully look for the root, and learning from naturopaths, learning from chiropractors, learning from physios, learning from every allied health professional and every alternative medicine. If we can collaborate and come together, we will have stronger bodies, stronger people, and stronger communities.
That's a really great vision, and one that we really need to embrace for health, I think, just generally, right? So I'd like to ask you a few questions about your childhood. Is there something that stands out in your mind that made you into the person you are today?
There's one specific event that really comes up at times, and when I think about it, and it's been coming up more and more the last couple of months. When I was little, I lived in an area. So you have to understand that South Africa at the time, there was democracy in 94, which means I was 10 years old, if you can do the sums. So when I was about 6 years old, there was still quite a bit of, segregation. As a child, you don't know what segregation is, right? You're kind of just living, enjoying life with friends, and you don't have any idea of what's going on in the world. I was 6 or 7 years old, and we used to have, we call them beggars. We used to have beggars come to our door and knock on our door, and they would ask for bread. So it's not the safest place, and it wasn't the safest place then either. And I was alone at home, and I would open the door and there would be somebody asking for bread. And I would go make the bread, and I would put cheese and meats and things like that, which is a very normal thing here, I guess. But in South Africa, that is like a luxury. Peanut butter is your average, and then going to your meats and your cheeses, that's luxury food. So I would give the beggar, that's the only way I can call it at this time. So the homeless person, I would go and give them bread. And my mom would get home, and the rest of my family would get home, and they would look for where the cheese and the meats are. And they would be so upset with me because they were like, why don't you just give this person butter on the bread, or just peanut butter or jam or whatever? And I said, well, I couldn't just let this person eat that kind of food that is so average. And I don't know if it's cheese is knocking at our door. And my family would be outraged because, first of all, I'm not supposed to open the door because it's not safe. And secondly, I'm giving away basically all the good food. So that's kind of a memory that has been coming up recently for me. That was kind of the seed that was planted in my heart, that everybody deserves not just equality, but equity. I'm learning a lot about equity now, because in the world, everything is about equality, but you can't treat people equal. There is no level where you can say we are equal now. It's about equity. Meeting that person where they are in their life and asking them what they require at this point, not what you think is the best for them, but what they think is the best for them. And obviously calling them Aya at that point. So that kind of stood out for me, even when I was playing, Dollhouse. all the girls were always mothers and the guys were fathers, I guess. I was also kind of making concoctions and putting on people's wounds, and it's just wonderful memories. And when I look back, I'm like, oh, when storms of life come and you're wondering about yourself, am I in the right place? Am I in the right position? Am I worthy? I go back to those memories and those thoughts, and I'm like, no, this has been implanted in me and I just can't get away from it, no matter how hard I try.
That's beautiful. Really, it speaks to your temperament, your natural inclination to help, to see what people need and to try and meet that need, and your desire to heal. Both of those incidents, they really provide insights into the quality of your spirit and who you are inside. It's really lovely. You know, I've heard lots of people say things like, if you give people what you don't need, that should be good enough for the poor. Or if you're poor and you don't want it, maybe you're not really that poor. And I think there's a lack of understanding that you understood from a young age that we are all deserving to be treated with dignity. And that's sometimes when people are coming from really down low, they need an extra leg up. They don't need breadcrumbs. They need a leg up to get some meat and cheese, so that they can survive for the next few days. So it's like the idea that everybody that you meet is like a guest, not someone that you should disparage, but someone you should treat as a guest, or someone with a lot of dignity and respect.
Exactly. And I don't do it perfectly always. There are days where I do, with the hurriedness of the practice and even life, going into a grocery store and parking, for example, or driving, or anything, life, the activities of daily life. Sometimes you're so in a rush that you forget the courtesy of giving that person a space, or not rushing through life and really engaging with people, making that eye contact, asking them about their day, their life. We miss out on so many moments because we are in such a rush, because we need to do this and that. And sometimes I just have to quiet myself and say, okay, I need to be present with today. I need to be present with this patient right now. Because for that patient is the most important person in his or her world right now. Never mind that I'm seeing 30 patients during the day, right? So that's also a big challenge. And that's something that I'm also working on. And then I also just want to add the last bit of what also drives me in medicine is that my parents, especially my father, my late father, he had really bad experience in the medical system. And I do believe there was racial disparities involved in this. And, there's a part that a patient plays and there's a part that a doctor plays. And seeing how my parents and my elders and some of the rest of my community has been dealt with in medicine has been really discouraging. And it's always been a driving factor for me, because the person that sits in front of you, and I teach my students this too, the person that sits in front of you, imagine that's your mother, father, sister, brother, child. When you see people like that, you will never not do your best. So in my father's situation, he had a lot of medical conditions which were not adequately treated, partly because of non-compliance, partly because whatever was happening at the system at the time. And I really aim to preach that and be an advocate for people that actually have to navigate in a medical system that's not always, I won't use the word kind, but that's not always easily accessible.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of bureaucratic hoops to jump through, and then you come back to the beginning of the circle where you started with no resolution a lot of times. And when people are marginalized, racialized, and they get an even worse experience. So the fact that you saw your father go through that difficulty and you already had those sensitivities, but that made it even stronger for you, makes you a great advocate for people, because you know what it's like to not be treated with fairness. What about when you were an adolescent or a young adult? Is there anything that stands out for you then?
I was involved with a lot of cultural activities, and I always brought people from other cultures home. And my family used to think this is just weird because we don't mix with other people. You stay within your ethnic group at the time. But I just loved people, and I love people from other cultures. It didn't matter to me. So that was a big one for me too, growing up and going to other people's homes, learning how their families operate. Families are very important to me. So I was blessed to experience different family structures, different family dynamics, what that looks like, what that means for me and what that means for the rest of the world. So that was a very interesting and special time for me as well. Yeah, that's about my adolescence that I can remember. I went to an all-girls school, which was amazing. It really taught us ladies. The statement wasn't, you can do anything a man can do, but better. That was never the precept of the school. It was always pushing us to be the best that we can be for society. So many of the girls that I went to school with became engineers, doctors, dentists, accountants, and everyone is adding to this world today, to society. So I'm very proud of that part of my schooling years, that I had the privilege, because we couldn't go to previously white schools, Model C schools. So we couldn't go to those schools for a very long time. So I was very blessed to be able to go to that school. I had a bursary to actually attend the school. So there were all these great things that happened that I hope and wish and dream for other girls or boys to experience a really good education, but not just an education, an academic education, but I was part of the entrepreneurial group. I was head of the entrepreneurial group. There were so many could take parts in Olympiads, science Olympiads, could go for functions that I wouldn't have been exposed to if I didn't go to that school, right? So there are so many things that we can miss out on if we're not in the right place, I guess. So I really enjoyed my time at school. People always laugh and they said, how could you have enjoyed high school? I loved high school. It was really a great time of my life. What I'm doing now was formed during my high school years.
A lot of the people I interview on this podcast are really successful in whatever they do. And I would say they're visionary, they're outliers in their field. And many of them say that their experience in high school was really important for them and was formative, and that they enjoyed it. And some even say that it was like a microcosm of a world that they want to recreate for others. And
wow.
So I think that people underestimate the importance of a school environment. It's your parents and your family, the culture surrounding you, the national culture, but the school has something to do with that too. And when you have a school environment that nurtures you and allows you to express yourself during those adolescent years when that's what you really long to do, and to develop your agency in the world, then it's wonderful. And when you don't, it holds you back for the longest time, sometimes forever, right?
Wow, absolutely. I've never thought of it like that, just because I had such a great time at high school that I can't imagine people not having a great time. But if I talk to my friends my age that maybe went to, say, a co-ed high school, didn't have the same experiences like me, right? Because at that time, most of the girls are trying to impress the boys and the boys are trying to impress the girls. So we were really at a point where, if I think about it, a lot of my confidence was built in those years because you just don't care. We did an oral in our nightgown, and I can't remember for what subject it was. And if we were at a co-ed school, we would have never even dreamed of that, because that would just be totally embarrassing, right? So it's so interesting that you say that. It's beautiful. They would describe it as a microcosm. But one thing that really matters is the teachers. Teachers are so important in a child's life. I remember in grade 5, one of our teachers, she's lived in England and America. So she had a worldview that was different to the rest of the community. And she took us for our first theatre play. It was Fiddler on the Roof. And I will never, ever forget it. Never, ever. To see a theatre production where the stage is actually rotating and the music and the costumes, for me, that made a big impression in my life. And that was like one of the things that actually really was like a stake in the ground for me, that I want a better life. And I need to just paint a picture for you, because it's not a normal thing to have done that, to have taken us an hour and a half away on a bus to go watch a theatre production. Because remember, we're still living in a segregated system where this was not available to us. This was not just, oh, you can go down the road and go to any pool, or you can sit in any restaurant or go to any they'll go to any theater. Those are still things that are very taboo in the culture. So I really appreciate that teacher for having the insight to take us. I don't know what impression it made on the other students, but for me, it was a stake in the ground. And the same with my high school, where my teachers taught us theater and we could explore different cultural activities and different sports, which really set us up for the future, if I can call it that.
Well, if you compare your experience with the comedian Trevor Noah from South Africa, and he talks about his high school where it was specifically geared towards not educating people, and high school students learning little rhymes for times tables that they would have learned in grade 2, and how debasing that was, and how they didn't know anything about the world, and consequently made significant mistakes afterwards as a result. You had the advantage of understanding the world and knowing what horizons could be open to you and where to go to get there. And that should be the gift of every child, don't you think?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I mean, people are hungry for it. I believe that if you don't know, you don't know. Mm-hmm. But once you're exposed to it, you're going to be like, wow, I've been missing out. Like, people normalize dysfunction a lot of times. And when you are not exposed to certain things, you think that's just the normal way of life. But yeah, so I was really in a really great position. And I have a lot of friends that are teachers, high school and primary school, and have the conversations, expose the children to different things. Even if you think it's useless, even if you think these kids don't understand or won't listen, just expose them. I have a good friend, a vice principal, and he used to take the kids to go pick grapes, like in the vineyard, right? And take them to the beach. It's the first time these kids have been to the beach, and it's probably the last. Their parents don't have the resources. It's not just easy to have a car and have gas, and everybody is just trying to, it's survival of the fittest. So I really appreciate teachers that put in a little bit more extra and widen the world a little bit more for the children.
You know, you just reminded me of a story when you said expose the children to things even if you think it's useless. I have a friend, she has a master's in the language of ancient Greek and then Greek culture. And her favorite hobby was needlepoint. Her husband was an engineer, and he was posted in a far north community in Inuktitut. They had never been there before. You had to take a plane and a helicopter to get to the community. It was that isolated. And it was a whole Innu community. And when she got there, she was completely out of her cultural element. And she thought, what can I possibly do that would be at all of service to this community? And so she went to the community meetings, and whatever they were doing, she just went to it and participated and tried to learn and tried to make some sense out of it. And then she thought, well, I'll just offer to teach anyone who wants to ancient Greek and see what happens. And so she offered, and 4 women within a couple of weeks came forward and said they wanted to learn it. And these were 4 women who had had a very bad school experience with really horrible, probably similar to Trevor Noah's experience, but in the north of Canada. So that experience, and didn't know much and felt they were very little confidence with their ability to learn. And they were really good at learning ancient Greek. And all 4 of them went on. They were the first people in their community to go on to get an education. And one became a social worker, one became a medical doctor. One learned 3 other languages and became a linguist. And I don't know what the 4th one did. And then they came back to their community, and everything that they did and thought was different. And just learning this thing that seems useless. What's useful about ancient Greek? Nothing. I mean, it's, but it's useful because they learned how to learn about something and how to gain confidence. And then the other piece was about the needlepoint. So she thought, I don't hunt. I don't know how to skin a seal. Like, I'm so useless in this community. And she thought, well, I do know how to do needlepoint. And so she went to the local high school and she said, I'm going to just start a needlepoint group if anyone wants to come to my place on Thursdays, 4:30 for an hour, and I'll show you how to do needlepoint. And so these 5 high school kids showed up one time in complete silence, and they just sat down, and she took out the needlepoint, and they didn't say their names or anything, and she couldn't get them to talk, and just started doing the needlepoint, and they were pretty good at it. They were amazingly good at it. And pretty soon they brought their friends, and there's 20 or 30 kids, all boys and girls, all doing needlepoint. It's certainly not Innu culture, but would be related to other types of things. So they did all this needlepoint, and then they started to talk about their lives, and it created a whole sense of a safe space for those kids to talk and to not get involved with drugs and alcohol, and to actually start to build their own sense of self and expression in the community that was healthy. And it just came from her sharing and listening.
Wow, that gives me goosebumps as you were talking. That is amazing.
I was just speechless when she told me that story. Absolutely speechless. Takes a lot to make me speechless.
Oh yeah, I'm speechless myself. Like I'm sitting here and goosebumps all over my body. That it blows me away. Wow.
This is the teacher influence we all have, and that's what you were saying about teaching patience too. From the groups that you were born into, what would you say has most influenced your sense of culture and self? So you certainly have some strong inner drive, but South Africa has lots of different terms for different cultures. Tell me about that.
You know, talking about teachers, I actually come from a very strong family history of teachers. My mother's a teacher and all her sisters and brothers are teachers. So those are about 5, 6 teachers in our family. So I realize more and more that that's something that you can't also get away from if it's in you. So lots of times talking to people is teaching and coaching. Mm-hmm. So I think it will be the justice part of where we were and where we are. Righteousness and justice, those are very important for me. And that comes through with the military, definitely. And then also my family and community. I've always been a big dreamer since I was very little. And I dream about things that were impossible, dream for myself, dream for other people. So that is the justice piece too, where nothing is impossible. You know, the saying, when you can dream it, you can believe it. It's an intersectionality of those, where growing up in a military culture and a military home, my parents really instilled a sense of a thing needs to be done a certain way, which has its pros and cons, of course. And for a very long time, I've rebelled against it very, very, very much. I've also had to come to mesh that into my life and be true to myself and say, how can I use the strengths from growing up in a very militant home, but then also inviting my cultural aspects into it, because my cultural aspects, it's very traditional aspects.
What does that mean, traditional culture, for you?
To be honest with you, tradition is not always good.
No.
It might be practiced, but it's not always good. And I think me and you have had this conversation before. So traditionally, what I've taken from my culture is that we love people. We love socializing. We love food. We build our lives around that, where I can just drive down to any aunt's house or any person's house, friend's house. I'll be invited in without appointment, and you'll sit down and you'll have tea and the cake will come out and the food will be made and the children will be running around and playing, and lots of honor, lots of respect. You know, you don't call the elder on their names. You call them aunt, uncle, Mrs., Mr., depending where their social standing. So those are things that are strengths for me. Also, there's not a big facade culturally with my ethnic group, I would say. People say what they mean and they mean what they say, whether you like it or not. It's not always a good thing because we know the power of words. And if a child or a person is told from a very young age, they're not good enough and this is what they can't do, or just even little jokes, right? Those are things that people can carry with them for a very long time. And if you don't have the guide and the strength to pull yourself out of those labels that people put you under, you are going to fit in that box. And that is not, I believe, who God had created people to be, to fit in a specific box according to cultural norms. For example, for myself, I've had to really, really wrestle and fight my way out with the most grace that I can, I believe, to really not succumb to just fitting into that mold of what my culture wants me to be.
What is that mold? What was that mold that they wanted you to be?
Well, I guess bringing home people from different cultural backgrounds and different areas, because certain people live in certain areas, that was kind of taboo, right? You don't bring somebody from a different culture into our area because we all just one ethnic group in this area, one color skin in this area.
So it's stick to who you know and who you're related to.
Exactly. Also, even like the different foods, you know, like we only eat a certain type of food. You know, if you want to try a different cultural food, then you're being seen as different or judged, I feel. Going to certain places that, let me just put it like this, that's only made for white people.
Yeah.
it's like,
yeah,
we're all human. Like, how is this only for white people? Or you do white people things? Or, so that's
like you're not acting like a proper Black person. You're acting as if you were white, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, we are called coloureds in South Africa. So it's a whole different different ball game, right? So it's just having to find your way out of it, but still staying true to, first of all, who God created you to be, but also your culture plays a role, and your culture is part of your strength. I've had to deconstruct my culture and take literally the good parts of it and discard the bad parts, and also discern what is good. Because what's good is not always good. Just because of socialization, it doesn't mean it's good.
Yes. What's popular is not always right.
Exactly. But my travels have helped me. My friends from different ethnic backgrounds have helped me. So this is a very big thing for me, and people don't talk about it. This has been something that I've had to work through. It hasn't been a strain for me. It's just something that I became aware of later in life, only later in life, not early in my life, later in life when I was training as a medical doctor, where I entered university, and my colleagues would say to me, but why are you here? Your people don't study. All you do is stab people, get drunk, take drugs, have babies, and be on welfare.
Yeah.
So, walking in that reality where I come from, in my culture, like I've never heard those things said, because I've never been exposed on that level to people thinking like that or seeing like that. I mean, even one of my good friends, he's a Zulu guy. So Zulu is a tribe in South Africa, very strong people. And he's one of my best friends. And he asked me the one day, he was looking at me, and he said, "Do you have your front teeth?" And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He says, "No, because all colored people extract their front teeth." And the story goes that the rest of South Africa thinks that every colored person's front teeth is extracted because we eat too much fish, because we live on the coast.
That's really odd, isn't it?
But the sad part of this is that, and this is what I learned late in my life, talking to my parents and family members, is that because there was no dental care for non-European people, if there was like a cavity or something like that, they used to just extract. There was no money for root canal or education on dental care or anything like that they were just extracted. And I mean, your front teeth is kind of first thing people see, right? Your eyes and your smile and things like that. And so a lot of these people were embarrassed. And then later on became a fashion to extract your teeth. From a painful history, it then became a fashion.
A painful fashion that causes you trouble for the rest of your life.
Exactly. And this is still happening, right? Your teeth is part of your immune system. And if you can't chew properly, your food can't digest, you have gastrointestinal issues for the rest of your life. It is such a massive injustice that was done to the people, and then translated over to a cultural traditional norm. And almost if you don't have your teeth extracted, who do you think you are? Do you think you're better than us? So my parents went through that era. And like I said, it's still happening now. So those are kind of the things that we really have to be careful of.
And just really, because something has become a cultural norm doesn't mean it's something you should keep. It doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's healthy. And I'm really happy to hear you say that, because if many people from different cultures say that, just because you've been doing it for 20 years or 40 years or 50 years, doesn't mean we should continue to do it, right?
Exactly.
If we all say that, we use the power of investigation and make up our own minds about things and say, is this really good for us? Should we be perpetrating it? Instead of just blindly following it, think how much better off the world would be.
And that's where I feel schooling, is so important, where you have that teacher that starts. And I remember when I was even in grade 5 to grade 7, where I had teachers that started imparting some type of thinking. And the schooling system, mostly in South Africa, is a British system. So you're not taught how to think. They tell you what to think and how to memorize facts. But nobody's been taught how to think and say, I really don't agree with it, and help me understand why. Right? So where we are actually talking with one another, debating an issue, and coming to understanding that maybe we will just agree to disagree, and that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. I could continue this conversation for a long, long, long time. You talked about the things that you were consciously saying, this is not just, this is not fair, this is not something I want to do, and you're consciously pushing against that and establishing something that's more equitable. But what about choosing something to adopt into your own sense of culture? Maybe from some of your travels or your friends or from coming to Canada, is there something that you've chosen that you've adopted into your culture? I'll give you an example. Okay, so I have a lot of exposure to Iranians. So I see pretty obviously the things that I love about Iranian culture and things I really dislike. Mm-hmm. You can't base it on one experience. You have to have had met many people from that cultural group. But one thing that I really love about Iranians is their desire to greet people. And whoever comes new into the room greets every single person before they sit down, and everyone stands to greet them if they were sitting. The greeting is, when I first experienced it, I just thought it was just bizarre. And afterwards, I thought this is a beautiful way to acknowledge each person as they come in, mm-hmm. and then to acknowledge that they belong to the group. Yes, we recognize and acknowledge you, and then please come and sit with us. So it's something that now, if I go into a group, I have to go greet everybody. I've adopted that into my culture. I didn't have it. It wasn't there before.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's a physical action, obviously, that translates into a honoring culture, right? So that's absolutely beautiful. For me, it would be probably acceptance. It's more a virtue. And then it translates obviously into the physical. So I would love for what I've realized in Canada and from my many travels that there's a whole world out there. And we kind of stuck in a very myopic view of what's going on in our world, even in our country, and not allowing ourselves to learn from other cultures. And we get closed off. And we've been doing this thing the same way for X amount of years. And now this is just how we are. And actually people starting to embrace and accept other people and other ways of life. For example, in South Africa, there's a lot of Somalian and Ethiopian immigrants. And since being an immigrant myself, I didn't one day think about them when I was living in South Africa. I just carried on with my life and, like I would see them and think, oh, it's great and so on. But now when I go back to South Africa, I make a point to go to the Chinese store and talk to the people, or to the Ethiopian or Somalian when I meet Somalians on the street or whatever, because I now know how tough it is to immigrate. Oh. It's so hard. And when your cultural norms are just so different. So now I have learned to open up my eyes and accept once again. And that is what I would love to bring to my culture, that everything is almost like closed off, as loving and as giving as my culture is. Very loving, very loving people, very loyal people, of the most loyal people you could find, but they only take it to the people that they might know. So just opening up and accepting and listening, and not just saying, oh, it's those people doing that and it's those people. Really breaking down the walls of segregation. I have a good friend and he's a Caucasian guy, and I so appreciate his questions. And he's really genuine and sincere, and I can pick that up. And that brings us closer together. And he would ask me about my culture. And he actually trains colored children athletics. And then he gets them scholarships to go to university. And he was kind of asking my advice about certain things. And I said to him, well, you can get the children scholarships, but if the children don't have the support and their parents don't have education, their parents may be alcoholics or just not present in the children's lives, if you are not present and really engaging with those children, they eventually drop out and end up working in a factory somewhere where they have the potential to go and get a degree and change the nation. Our education, of course, in Africa is very big, because that's how you get out of poverty. We can't get around those two. It's just not possible. So then those kids go back into poverty. So he really asked me sincere questions, trying to understand. And
he didn't understand the context of social class, which is a mistake so many people who are generous and philanthropic make.
Yes.
They go, oh, let me just help this one person. And they don't understand that you can't help a person because it has to live somewhere.
Exactly. But the beauty of him was he never assumed and he never pretended. And that's the difference. Because people assume and they pretend that they know.
He sincerely asked.
he sincerely asked and he sincerely listened. Okay, it also helps that he's a psychologist. So that really made an impression on me, that I can go and talk to him about any cultural nuances, and he will listen and not just think, oh, I'm just being maybe dramatic about the situation or whatever. He's very interested. Whenever we sit down and talk, we would talk about these type of things. And that makes him engage with his students and people on a different level. So that makes a difference. But that's him coming from a South African white male perspective. Now, coming back to my own culture, it feels like sometimes everybody wants to scream racism, but when you look at yourself, have you asked yourself if you are racist against other groups? So that I would love to have conversations around that and really get people to open up their hearts and what has hurt them in the past and what they've seen in the past, because it's no use we just keep to ourselves and we assume that a certain cultural group does a thing a certain way and stereotype, because we have to open up ourselves and learn different cultural groups and what's beautiful about it, and take the strengths from those groups and impart it, like you've done with the Iranian culture, impart it in our own lives. So that's the main thing. I think it's the acceptance and allowing ourselves not to be ignorant and asking the right questions. There's a professor that wrote a book, and his book was We Should Talk. And it's all about all these things that has been happening in South Africa for the past don't know how many years, and how we're trying to bridge that gap and becoming a rainbow nation. And I believe that should start happening, that we should start talking and not just assuming that a male acts a certain way or female even acts a certain way. That person in that social class acts a certain way. That person in that ethnic group acts a certain way. Then judgment comes in, of course, and then the walls become even higher, right? So, I would love my group to become more aware.
It's your own, and this is really, I think, part of your temperament, which is that you're curious, you're hungry to learn, and curiosity is endearing. When people are judgmental and they ask you a judgmental question, it's certainly different from somebody saying, what's that like for you? Instead of saying, oh yeah, you people are all like this. That's not the same question at all. Quick question about your temperament and your personality. It sounds like you've had a very strong bent towards justice, fairness, helping people. That's part of your temperament, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yes, that's probably one of the major ones.
People usually add on to their strengths. What have you added that you say you might not have had in your personality before?
Wow, that's an excellent question. And to be honest, I've never thought about it. So that is so excellent. I believe that I've become more endearing and hopefully more understanding of where people are at, because I want the best for people. One friend said, oh, you love to play Sims with people's lives. And I don't know if you know the game Sims. You design homes for people and you put them there like that. And I know what she meant, because I want the best for somebody and I want them to reach their highest potential. And I've had to learn that it's not always the case. And then I would get frustrated and I'd feel, despondent and discouraged. But I had to learn to meet people where they are at and really accept them. Not accept their potential, but accept who they are right at that spot, and not look at the dream and what they could be and what they could become. So that has been probably my biggest journey over the last couple of years. I can't want for people what they don't want for themselves.
That's a really profound statement, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I still struggle with this. This is still a big challenge for me when I sit with my patients, is that, in Canada, we've got all these great support systems. We've got just amazing resources that people have poured into this country. And I want to expose a patient to everything. If you do this, this, and this, and this, I can see radically how your health and everything will change. But if a person is not ready to engage on that level and they're not ready to work and make the decision for themselves, I can't do that for them. And I believe most doctors, people in the helping profession, feels like that. I know you feel like that, Marie, that you just feel that, wow, if they could just do this one thing, at least, So I've had to learn to really take a step back, meet them where they are, give them what they need for the day. For example, I've got a couple of homeless patients, and our first thing is to house people and to make sure they've got food and to make sure they've got, clean clothes and all that stuff. And, I have patients that I had to learn that I have to ask them, do you want to be housed? And many of them don't, because they see it as their autonomy being taken away if they are housed, when they can sleep under a bridge or sleep in a tent or be social with their friends or walk around, picking up deposits. That's their freedom. And I've had to at first I was aghast. I'm like, who doesn't want the house, right? Like, there are systems, we can work this out for you. But I've had to learn to accept that and actually meet them with what they want today and now, and be gracious enough for the next time when they come, right? Because they're going to stumble and fall. And I can do whatever I can do on my part and just accept them back in when they come back, even if it's not up to my standard.
Yes, that's very profound, really. And that's, again, I would love to hear a lot of people saying that that's what they're doing. learning to accept people from where they're at and not trying to put them into a box that you can understand and then walk away and say, yep, done that, been there.
Yes, exactly. I think it's the dopamine reaction that, the reward system, we've got these boxes that we have to tick.
That's got to be one of the dopamine hits for people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I can put you in a box. Woo-hoo, zing, dopamine hit right there.
and you are the success story, and I'm the savior, and I've done so great. And I've had to die to all those preconceived ideas, and I still try my best, but I've also just had to. And yesterday we actually had a strategic meeting and planning, and because I'm part of a nonprofit, the whole thread of the meeting was asking people what they need at that point and personalizing it to giving them the autonomy to actually decide. And that was a big major shift for us and for me especially, because
you're helping professionals. Exactly. You're geared to help. Yes. The whole thing is, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Where are you at? What works for you? And if you don't want to do this, fine. It's not geared that way, is it?
It's not geared that way. It's guidelines. It's, this is what you have to do. This is what you do. Why didn't you do that? You should know better,
Yeah, you should know better. Why didn't you take your medicine regularly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why didn't you show up for your appointment?
Exactly. And we want to be a safe place. We want to be a home to people where people are always welcome back. Of course, there's a level of respect and there's a level of honor and responsibility. People have been so traumatized, Marie, that they just don't have the capacity. And I need to learn where I stop, where I do the work, they do the work, and God does the rest. And allowing that process to have its fulfillment.
So can you recall a time when you became aware that your cultural understandings were just really specific to you and your culture? You've already mentioned quite a few, but is there another one that comes to mind?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I 8 months into being in Canada. So I was going obviously through, you first go through the hard stages of doing everything. Then you go through the honeymoon phase, and you explain this to me. So I always bring that up to people, and you put it in perspective. And 8 months into being here, I really felt almost depressed, dissociated and disconnected. And that's not my personality. I can will myself and really talk to myself and get myself up and going. And I just couldn't, and I couldn't understand it. And I mean, this is personal, but I rocked up at your house one day and I said, this is what I'm going through. And you said, do you know what you're going through? And I said, what? You said, you're going through a cultural shock. And I was like, wow, is this what it is? 8 months later, I thought it would happen early. And I spoke to a friend, and you just gave me a lot of perspective and peace. And I probably every second I talk about that moment to people, especially really people. Kind. Yeah, yes, because I would have probably struggled with this, and nobody would have understood it except you. And I was like, wow, this makes sense, and now I can help other people going through immigration woes about the cultural shock. Actually, yesterday I met a gentleman from Nassau, the Bahamas, and they're going through the same thing. And I said, well, this is what my friend said to me, and this is what I went through. And yeah, so it just makes me aware that I'm not able to just rock up at people's house and go for coffee, or have the comfort of family and friends around, people that understand you, people that know you, people that know when you say a thing that is actually a joke. Mm-hmm. And it's not meant to offend you,
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
And that's been a big thing, where my culture is quite direct and confrontational. And we just say, whatever we need to say. It's not meant to hurt the person. It is a way of expression. That's our kind of our love language, if I can call it that, right? So I've had to be careful, and I'm not always careful because I'm still working on it. I won't say, I won't use the word politically correct, but be a bit more sensitive to people. First of all, my accent is different. And when I speak, people are not always going to understand when I even make the joke that that's actually supposed to be a joke.
Humor is a major thing in cultural difference, and every culture has its own brand of humor. And some things are just funny for everybody, and other things are really specific to the context.
Exactly. So yeah, just the humor part has been a big one, and just being engaged with people in the community all the time, being able to just have, I mean, our weather is lovely, so our doors are literally open all the time. Like our literal doors are open all the time. So going to your neighbor's house is easy. Somebody sending you back with a little bit of food or what they've made, or just talking to somebody in the street about something. I know when South Africa went through this major drought, water crisis, everybody was giving each other advice in the grocery stores, like, oh, this is how we're conserving water. Try that. So that's just that community Ubuntu spirit once again was a major shock for me, that I don't find it readily available.
Love Canadians to develop that and adopt that into the culture, because it's never made sense to me, and I grew up here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you are definitely a unicorn, my friend. So that's the beauty. But I do find, I must say, I'm very blessed to have amazing Canadian friends, but I also have a lot of friends from the Middle East and South America, and that has brought it together for me, that I can engage, that it doesn't have to be my way all the time and the way I want it. And this was also a big lesson for me that I've learned in the last 2-3 years, that I have to engage on a level that also respect and honor people, and that I have to start, if I want community, I have to start inviting people to my house. I need to do the things that my elders are doing back home and my friends and family are doing back home.
I've yet to taste a South African meal.
To be honest with you, and I always tell people this, I do not know how to make any South African meal, just because the variety is so vast. So I won't be able to make you a specific thing, but
that's okay. We can go to a South African restaurant together. I actually found one.
Exactly. which I'm going to on Saturday, which I'm hoping that I will send you the details. So cool. So of course our food is so different, and I can make you anything, but I'm not going to say that that's specifically South African.
So you said something, I think I have never said anything about this on the podcast, so maybe I'll just explain. The process of cultural shock that people go through is both cyclical and linear at the same time. So first, people are just in stun phase. It's just everything is different and they don't know how to negotiate anything. In fact, rhythms change from the way they walk. You can put a beat to the walk of a city or a town. People learn a certain way, and they know if you're not from there because you don't have the right beat. Everything is just a stun phase. And then after the stun phase, then people start to think there's something wrong with them because they feel like they're stupid for some reason, that they're just not getting things. And that people will say things like, I used to be pretty fast at learning these things, but now I'm not. But it's not that you haven't learned something. It's just that there are cultural differences and you don't know that you are in a cultural negotiation situation. And then people start to get sick and they feel really lonely and depressed. And somewhere in between there happens 2 or 3 times they reach a honeymoon phase where they're just all thrilled to pieces, like I'm here and the world is beautiful and everything's good and the sky's the limit and all these opportunities are available to me. And then they hit reality and it's just so hard. Or somebody says something racist or rude to them and they just feel they are driven right back. And at some point, people start to lose their sense of who they are. And they go, I feel like I've lost myself since I came here. And then when they feel safe, culturally safe, they start to see what's good about both cultures and what they love about both. And they just can't do that at first. It's just not possible. I'm working with an African organization that supports Pan-African immigrants, mostly West African, but they have some from East Africa as well. And they have a summer camp. And this year, the children in the summer camp, instead of calling them their facilitators by their first names, which people do in Canada, they started calling them auntie and uncle.
Mm-hmm.
The facilitators knew now they feel safe here. Now they feel safe to be, now they feel that they can negotiate the cultural differences on solid ground because they have a foundation. But that takes years.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen overnight. As you go through it at different stages again, over and over again in a cyclical way. But generally, it's about 12 months to just get through the worst of it. But then it keeps reoccurring, just to a lesser degree. So when people understand that, they can be patient with themselves and patient with the culture that they happen to find themselves in.
That is absolutely so mind-blowing and wonderful. Yeah, just exactly what people go through here. And when we understand that, we feel encouraged and we feel seen and we feel more grounded. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. We're just about at the end of the interview here. So I just wanted to ask, what brings out the best in you, in Dr. Laurika Booysen? What makes it so that you can really be yourself in a work environment? What do you need for that to happen?
I love to see people flourish. That's probably the biggest gift that I can receive. Seeing people flourish in all areas or different areas of their lives, whether it's small or big stuff that they've overcome. Freedom, autonomy to do what I can do and what I can add to this world, because we all have a part to play. And my part is different from another doctor's part, another nurse, or anybody's part in this world. So really being allowed to be unique and to be myself, that allows me to flourish. And then I can impart whatever I need to impart and be energized to impart it to the next individual. And hopefully that's like the snowball effect. I think somebody said one thing one day about, and I didn't know this until he said that. He said, as South Africans, we are very justice orientated. And I think that's probably the drive, that because of what happened in the country, we always want the best for people and we want freedom. And I didn't go through an intense, I would say, an apartheid era. But if you think about generational trauma that's been, transferred through, I would actually call this a generational blessing. We can actually say, no, but this is just not right in the system. This needs to change. And I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't even part of that. My parents weren't activists, but I believe that has come through. And we actually need to grab hold of it. Now that I'm saying it, I'm realizing it. I didn't know this was it. But it's actually, you have, almost like a disenfranchised justice, because you are actually wanting to experience justice for other people just because you've seen so much oppression, and it's still systemic right through. It hasn't ended just because apartheid has ended. There's still so many things going on that has been like rife throughout people's lives. So I believe it's the freedom to be who I am called to be, who God has created me to be, and also allowed to then share that with others.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything you would like to promote or tell people about that you think would be useful?
Well, we are endeavoring to we're building a community health center in our community on the west side, and our passion is to have a healthier community, not just an individual. And it obviously starts with individual, but to have families really be strengthened in Canada, to have every individual be who they are actually meant to be and not be, squashed by the system. And facilitating that's our biggest goal, to be able to see a better society in the next 10, 20, 30 years, where people are allowed to grow and allowed to act in an autonomous way, but then also to pay it forward and to give back to our community, to not just receive, but actually to be strengthened in such a way that your children are strengthened and your grandchildren are strengthened, and we can build a legacy of strength with all the great things that Canada and the forefathers had to lay on this land, but also to bring in what the immigrants have to offer and to build up like a tree being built up and be strong and to actually create shade for others. There's a scripture that says, that talks about healing of the nations. And Canada is the only country with a flag with a leaf on. And that is what I truly believe Canada is. Canada is for the healing of the nations. That is what I want to really encourage people with, that Canada is not some hidden country up north, and we're not the Arctic, although it feels like that. But we actually, if we can grab onto that this nation is responsible for allowing immigrants in, that it's a nation of mercy, and that it's a nation that's actually going to be part of a great healing of all nations. So I believe that is what this nation is called for.
Thank you so much for
being Marie.
Part of this, the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast community. And I feel very honored that you spent this time sharing your wisdom and your insights with us.
Thank you for having me, and I bless your podcast and the rest of your time and day. And thank you for what you have not just imparted in my life, but in so many others. I am truly honored by you.
Well, it's a mutual admiration club. Laurika Booysen is a brilliant and emotionally wise medical doctor who has built a life around helping others and devoting her learning to multiple ways of healing. Her mission to heal is actualized as she applies both her strong Western medical training and deep curiosity about people's actual experience to the lives of marginalized and dispossessed. She helps her patients see themselves as the beautiful and capable souls they are, while taking on her own homework of detaching from any preconceived assumptions about what they should do or be to live whole and healthy lives. My interview with Dr. Laurika Booysen was deeply illuminating and satisfying. I hope you feel, as I did, her healing presence in the way she so humbly and eloquently told her personal story. Thank you for listening. I hope you will share the podcast with someone you think would really benefit from it, and may Culture and Leadership Connections continue to guide and inspire your day.
This podcast would not be possible without the expertise of our Culture and Leadership Connections production team. A big thank you and shout out to Mike Kurlander for audio production and editing, to Malvika Kathpal for the show notes, Bernadette Guadiz for online web and social media management and promotions, Celine Bayogo for design, and Kirsten Hoyer for website and branding. Thank you so much.